You know that I've been kind of bedridden most of the days since the middle of March, so about 2 months now, where I can only walk around for a couple hours and then have to lie down, and Jennifer's been doing much of the work on the farm. So
there's no treatment for what you have?
Well, that would mean going to a doctor, exactly those people who are involved in my problem.
Yeah.
What it is basically the equivalent of a poisoning. And it affects the nervous system and makes it impossible for me to stand for any amount of time, or even walking down the stairs in the house is a major chore. And it either kills you or makes you stronger. Something like a vaccine, it has an effect which basically makes you feel bad for a while, hopefully, so that you will not be affected in the same manner at a later time. I think I'm on the recovery side of what it is that has been used, and we think it's probably a pesticide used in the growing of corn, and hopefully within a month or so I should be recovered.
That means Jenny's probably going to eventually go through this in the future.
Well, everybody is going to feel the problems of a collapsing world within a very short period of time. We're dealing with a situation where we're at a period which is the crunch of what's about to happen. In my mind, I've divided the existence of humans on the planet in kind of 16,000-year periods, and if you think of it as pre-Ice Age, which lasted about 16,000 years, from 24,000 BC to 8,000 BC, you're basically dealing with about 16,000 years there. Before 24,000, going back to 40,000, would be the mass genetic engineering activity in Africa. Prior to 40,000 BC would be the study into genetic engineering. So now we're dealing with a period from 8,000 BC to 8,000 AD. And the first 4,000 and the last 4,000 are pretty quiet. It's the underground stuff in preparation for the activity. And the first 4,000 years was to establish the type of genetic engineering that they wanted to do in different parts of the world, so that there would be these gene pools that were common to an area, but people could be picked out of there and brought to another area to do something that they were specifically designed to do. And now is kind of the recovery period. Do what you were sent to do, and then close down your operation. So between 0 and 2000 AD, things were planned. The agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the technological revolution, and the journey to outer space. Now that that's been accomplished, and a number of people, 7 billion, were put on the planet to be tested as to war, pestilence, famine, and disease, and how they can be used to affect their livelihoods. Now that that's over with, we're going into the second 2,000 years, and that's basically doing the books, doing the archives, doing the cover-up, getting ready for the period that goes quiet while Alder Amin moves in as a second son, and the people who remain go underground.
So these people who go underground,
well, there are some people on the planet who believe that they can cause or contribute to the destruction of this version of humans, and then preserve their own selves by hiding below the plates of the earth, above the core, above the mantle, in the moho discontinuity, while a period of heat equal to the Ice Age goes by, killing off most of the life on the planet itself, the Earth itself being kept basically ready to be used at another period in time, rather than having anybody living there.
Well, these people,
that period of shutdown for the Northern Hemisphere, which contains by far the largest population on the planet, 6 billion or so out of the 7 billion, has to occur during this window of opportunity, where there is a contrast between areas of cold and areas of heat, and the melting of ice, and the use of that ice for the purpose of flooding areas, causing hurricanes, causing tornadoes, all of those things, and eventually redistributing the potable water out of North America because of its links to the maple, which provides a much sweeter fresh water than you could find anywhere else. About 9% of the potable water of the earth is in the Great Lakes, and that, I am of the opinion, has already begun, without showing yet the worst impact of what it's in fact going to do. And I think we're going to see the beginning of that impact more in the period which we call the middle of the year, but they call the end and the beginning of the year, June and July. Those 2 months that were added with the Gregorian calendar.
So, who are these people who think they can contribute to ending this version of human beings? Well,
the name they go by internally, because it's not used in public, is ecclesiastic Freemasonry. In other words, it's an original version of I'm the master, you're the slave, that began by the creation of formal religions prior to the Ice Age. Yeah. They are the ones, the only ones, who are in a position to claim they possess the archives of everything that has occurred from the period of the beginning of memory, which was the creation of trees in about 80 million BC. So think of it, if up to only a few hundred years ago, the only people who could read and write and direct things were basically religious people. They come from that camp, and that camp is divided basically into two groups, male and female, and each group is also subdivided into factions. Now, to do the things that are happening today, they've added other camps that basically operate as either royals or politicians on the one hand, lawyers or court systems making decisions on another hand, and military that can basically do the cleanup of what is necessary at the end of the cleansing of each group. You don't have to have a group of people who will scan the earth from the skies, the International Space Station, and others on the ground who will be out chasing the survivors, getting rid of those people, and that job most likely falls to the military, and within the military, the Navy is the group that basically has done all of the exploitation around the world, and using the ocean was a great benefit for them in learning how you would use outer space as a means of travel at some time in the future. And that's why the Navy is not only responsible for things that happen on the ocean, but they're also given the responsibility for the exploration of space.
What's creation's role in all of this?
Well, creation is basically a process of genetic engineering in a very slow, moderate way, with evolution being punctuated by cataclysmic events which bring about major changes. At one stage of the game, creation had made it clear that it was not acting as a dictator or master, but simply as a facilitator, allowing human beings to evolve in a manner which we would call free, which is basically linked to the word tree, the first plant with ongoing memory. The people responded at one stage of the game by demanding they be given outright control. And that was probably done in the context of giving birth, where it became clear that having children was beneficial, helpful to the existing population, but the complaint was always that it came with a lot of pain, especially during the birthing process. And by asking for direct control, what occurred was a process of giving birth was orchestrated by religious people. And that would mean that families were basically given pre-packaged babies. And those babies were made in a factory called a monastery, a convent, and deep within the convent because it was kept secret, and then handed over under the name foundlings to the families who were interested in growing their numbers and being assisted financially by the religious people. That way, the religious people could genetically engineer babies who were very task-specific in their life, either to fit into the rank of the masters or the ranks of the slaves, was the majority of activity that was done, while other individuals were cast in the imagery of boogeymen, such as mass murderers and serial rapists, who could be used by the media to scare the population into remaining within the ranks they were made to occupy. Over time, there was a shift from those people who would normally respond with the word no, I don't want to do it, to yes, what is it that you need from me? And you know, of course, that the yes generation exists today in New York State, and the programming, the concept of what they would be like, probably comes from Boston and the Boston area, which has been described as the ground zero of genetic engineering in a program of manufacturing yes people, which, by the way, is the broadcast word for the New York Yankees, the Yes Network. And then the follow-through would be done in Maryland, studying the results of the types of people they had manufactured and how during their life they in fact had acted, was being monitored by a group of people in Maryland, which is the home as well of the U.S. Navy. Navies, of course, going back to the old Navy, the Phoenicians, dealing phonetically with the project of Cain the Builder. All of that, in my view, is coming to a point in time where you will be able to describe three false starts: 2011, 2012, 2013, and a go-ahead in 2014. But to confuse the issue, they've changed the calendar so that, in fact, we think of the beginning of the year as January, while they think of the beginning of the year as July. So expect anything cataclysmic. The difference between evolution and the current plan called evolution is basically one evolves by itself randomly and slowly over a period of time until the events allow for change to occur. Evolution is the controlled evolution of things rather than the natural slow evolution of things. And the speed up of these activities in order to fit the master plan, leading to a predetermined push-the-button type cataclysmic activity that within a very short period of time, and here we can describe it as 2,000 years basically since the birth of Christianity, which has nothing to do with anybody called Jesus Christ, but has more to do with Christ is linked to the IRS, and Jesus is linked to the Caucasus, which basically mean the race of Caucasians, the second version of Caucasians, first one having begun in a period about 2000 BC, the second one at 0, and the birthplace being where the sweetest fresh water in the world was found, which is the boot, which, if you look at a map, is the shape of Ontario, Canada. The original boot is Italy, and it was done to set up the entire project, and then the boot that's been taken off is kind of a folded fireman's boot, which is the province of Ontario. The principal product, the province of Ontario, and why it was kept separate from the U.S., is the pristine nature of the land, which grows predominantly sugar maple tree. And as it takes in the sap in the spring and releases the sap in the fall, the major change that occurs is the changing of the color of the leaves in a maple tree, which is why the Europeans, the Germans, and the Danes call their children Leif. Leif Erikson, with the Vikings, for example, was a visitor to North America. Why Toronto misspells the word into maple leafs in order to disguise the fact that if they wrote it the way it's supposed to be in the English language, it would be maple leaves, Leaves, but that would kind of open the searcher's mind to the fact that leaves, if you consider it English coming from French, le means the, and then ave means ave, the new way, the avenue, ave, the new way of genetic engineering, which is the sole purpose of the existence of human beings on the planet from the period of 8,000 BC to 8,000 AD. The maple leaf being a machinery, if you want, in a plant that has memory, a tree. The life-giving purposes of the sap became the important product, since there is no fruit attached to a maple tree, and the end product is basically a leaf that changes colors in the fall, usually to the color red in Bruce Peninsula. It became a very interesting way of cleansing water and sweetening water by having it being contained in the Great Lakes. Of course, that's why they call human beings today Homo sapiens, sapien. A lot of people have mistaken that to mean apian, or like monkey, but in fact it's more like sap. It's the knowledge gained by the sweeter water that is produced by the maple tree. And eventually maple syrup. Now, the Great Lakes on the border between Canada and the United States basically contain the end product of this sap runoff in the fall that freezes over during the winter and then is released again in the spring. But the runoff from Lake Superior down to the Atlantic Ocean through the St. Lawrence River and Gulf is basically limited to less than 10% of the water that is containing the sugar, because it's only the surface part that flows out, while the sugar keeps dropping down to the lowest places in the Great Lakes, and over thousands of years, because, say, Lake Superior being 1,200 feet deep, has accumulated most of the sugar. Now, if you take the flow out basically to Lake Erie, which is, I believe, connected to a number of salt mines, and you have an understanding of chemistry, you know when you're baking, when you're cooking things, that the distribution of sugar and the sweetness of sugar is enhanced in a recipe by the addition of a little bit of salt. So if you have Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Georgian Bay, Gore Bay, Lake St. Clair, all producing sugar, and then they pick up salt from Lake Erie, it enhances it still. And therefore, the best fresh water flowing would be that goes into Lake Ontario and eventually narrows into the St. Lawrence Seaway, which is just 1 mile across and 35 feet deep, and that would explain why, if you're going to manufacture babies in order to supply the needs of the western United States, the best water you could gather would be in the St. Lawrence Seaway, the edges of which have an inflow against the current from the ocean of salt water, with the middle of the flow of water going towards the Atlantic being sweet water. And you know that we talked about the 3 parts of genetic engineering. One is to gather a number of eggs, remove the content of DNA, genome or instructions, recipe, whatever you want to call it, subdivide it into their own containers, and then rebuild an egg with the known recipe or contents of the type of people you want to make. So that gives you your starting point. Your seed is the egg. Then the next part is the fertilization of the egg by comparatively acceptable male sperm that will not detract from the recipe that you've prepared for the actual infant, but will basically spark, kind of bring to life that egg. But the most important part is the containment of that fertilized egg in a solution, an amniotic fluid, in a lab that will add to it the life force that one gets from the nurturing aspect given by a mother to a fetus. In this case, in a laboratory, using the best formula for a sort of amniotic fluid that brings with it the best results in life, and that's one that is sweet water obtained by a mixture of water coming from a maple tree and mixed in with seawater. You will change the liquid content of the human being, the humor, which basically is the blood and the saliva and the bile and the phlegm, that type of product that is basically known to scientists as the humor, which in turn means it creates the balance required for a certain type of individual and their personality. And when they were doing this kind of activity back in the Himalayas and using fir trees as the source of sap, they found that gave them a perfect warrior, slave, violent person, and eventually over the years changed that formula by moving away from coniferous trees into deciduous trees, going the route of the fig and the date, and eventually coming to rest for a majority on the orange tree, using orange juice as part of the formula. And just before they came to North America, seemed to have made a modification using the apple tree, and later found a version of the apple tree that did not give off a fruit, but retained within the water itself, within the sap itself, the sugar that would normally go through the process of making an apple. And they call that tree maple, simply by playing with the letters, going from pa to ma, from father to mother. So we're here. This is the time. We're in the window of opportunity, and the numbers 2 and 1 keep popping up. The number 3,000 keeps popping up, all suggesting that by the year 3000 there will be manufactured and walking on the planet a species that is only partially known today as women, and that this species will be in the form of a woman on the outside, but controlled by a male fertilizing plant on the inside, such as hermaphrodites were at the beginning of the creation of African clan mothers. And this will be the model that will then be modified with the technology of computers and communications to be used in space travel, where one person per vehicle, this female male called women, will be shipped out in a craft resembling an acorn, as opposed to the original corn where a number of kernels all looking alike were made, Asians. This version will be singular in nature and will use its craft as the communications device to keep in touch with the people who are supposedly waiting to exit the area below ground, but this time not simply underground, but below ground in the moho discontinuity. My view is that they are mistaken. They don't have all the information which derives from evolution. They only have the information deriving from evolution. And unintended consequences are usually the end product of not having all of the information. Jumping to conclusions always leads to problems. Whatever information they have, Gerd, is all linked to information learned since this period of time began. 4000 BC to 4000 AD is the working space. But the information they were given was given to them by their own God, who divided the information in two and gave each one basically half, neither one having the whole. But that's the whole according to their God, which is ecclesiastic Freemasonry, and not necessarily the whole if you were being handed the information from creation. And right now we're seeing a recognition of that problem with religious institutions having, for example, a central headquarters at the Vatican, the largest creator bloc of Christians, losing power to outside groups. The Pope has just been replaced by an Argentinian. The nuns are divided into three groups. One that wants to remain solidly with the Vatican and live within religious communities. A second group called Women Religious, who want to support the Vatican but do it from a place within the community and have left the religious abodes to live in a secular community with the ordinary people. And a third group of people who reject both the living in a monastery and the financial support of the Vatican, and are now breaking away from the women religious groups to say, no, they want to have a system that supports gay marriage, that is more in line with the media concept of what is right and wrong rather than the religious concept of what is right and wrong. So none of them have, however, what I'm talking about is that even if they had all the information that has been made known during this period in time since Adam and Eve, they don't have all of the answers. Creation did not give all of the answers because creation is a process of evolution over a long, long period of time that allows the process, the freedom to evolve, and its choices are basically made without direction. That's what created trees in the first instance, and that's what created human beings from the concept of a memory bank, one that was not stuck in one place, recording only the activities of that one particular place. Now, whatever it is they do, they will in fact fail at the concept. of freedom. And they will fail at the concept of ascended master because they don't understand the things that happened before the Ice Age. We, on the other hand, were sent here to pick up from what exists today a critical mass of people to lead to an eventual exit from this universe, lead all those people who did not cause the problem or who repented truthfully for their participation in the problem, to move out of this area and leave evolution behind to whatever it is condemned to have to go through, and reestablish the concept of evolution or creation in a parallel universe from the point of view excluding all of the problems that were created by the concept of there is the possibility of gain without pain.
And you were explaining before something about the gatekeeper, you opening the door and Jenny closing the door. Could you explain that concept?
Yeah, well, in order to explain that, we have to begin in a time before genetic engineering became a factory concept. And it was involving Neanderthals who were testing the types of people that they would want as servants in their own environment below ground. And the first model that they made ended up producing a twin with two different birth dates, one male, one female, and because it was all genetic engineering, they had manufactured an egg that would make that happen, a male first and a female later on from the same egg. When they did that, from what I've been told, the quality control that they had in place at the time for making this particular slave in a period at about 42,000 BC had inadvertently contained some leftover material, something like mother of pearl from an oyster stuck to the wall, and included in the manufacturing of this particular human divided into two sections, male and later on female, some leftovers from original clan mothers, which basically would mean with a memory of the things that clan mother had with her, and it's uncertain whether that means to a period of time around 58,800 BC or further back to about 130,000 years. But in any event, much older memory than they had wanted, because they didn't want any memory beyond their control, beyond Neanderthal or Amazonian control. But in any event, that individual was born, and it was decided that they would be sent on different paths, retained as they were, replaced with a new batch called Denisovans, where they corrected the mistake, and later on Cro-Magnon, before the creation of Roma to be their agents on the planet. So this person was reanimated into society to test out different opinions over time. From what I understand and what I have been told, putting the two together, I was speaking genetically rather than personally. I was reanimated 700 times since 42,000 BC to check out how a clan mother, for example, would have reacted if she had been there at the time. And then Jennifer was reanimated 37 times when things were very specific to women's secrets, and which basically means that when I die and I am reanimated again through genetic engineering, this time of creation, because in this lifetime I figured out what was going on and changed sides and found Jennifer and told her, and she changed sides and is now an agent of creation. When we lead the journey out of the fifth dimension, where we are basically seeing the people awaiting the exit and some doing karma-type cleansing in the cell, I have the key that unlocks the gate leading out of the fifth to the sixth dimension, while Jennifer has the key linking the sixth dimension to the next universe. And that's basically our only purpose. The critical mass of people, which we suggest is 13, will carry with them the archives of lessons learned to date, so that they can be applied without the need to wonder what would happen if they did it the wrong way, because they'd have that information with them. And then the masses who are living free lives and not trying to rule over others the way they do here, they will then start again from where they left off the last time. That's basically the principle as far as I understand it now, which in their world they call comprehend more than understand, and in this world it's known as overstand.
Well,
comprises the end, comprehend.
So do you have anything to tell anybody who wants, anyone just hearing this, who wants to understand?
Do I have anything to tell you about what?
I said, do you have anything to tell people who are just hearing this?
First of all, tell everybody to ask themselves if they are happy with what they know about the system as it exists today. And if they are, then please don't bother us. Go on with your lives and stay out of our way, because we have nothing in common. Secondly, if they are not happy with what is happening today and they would like a different opinion, then contact us. And by contacting us, they are basically on a fact-finding journey. If they have something to offer, whether that be knowledge, goods, services, that would be helpful, but not obligatory. If they believe, however, that they may just have what it takes to be part of the 13 who have within their personalities something that would equate to wisdom and would be useful to the critical mass, then they should come and visit here. If they come and visit and we find that they may just have the kind of wisdom that is required in 1/13 of wisdom, it would be suggested to them that they consider the context of what we're saying as a journey rather than a destination. And the first part of the journey would be to die, because that's obligatory before you move to the next step. And their DNA would be diverted from its regular journey here to a fifth dimension, where in concert with creation, they would form a partnership with a group of people who would go through a process much as the Hindus describe as karma, and be sent down to repair some of the damages that they may have created while they were here in a different format than a simple human being, but more as an investigator with capabilities beyond those of the police. Then when they've achieved their ends, they return to the fifth dimension and join the group of people who are awaiting transfer to the next universe.
Very well put.
The existing cell today is basically occupied these days in investigating what they have dubbed the 777 project, which is basically a project set up by the insurance industry of the world, ecclesiastic Freemasonry included in some aspects, the health departments of the world, starting with the UN's World Health Organization and then local health units, the police departments of the world, who in fact are most times more the criminal than the investigators, and have files containing the activity they've been required to participate in. And that is being all looked at by these cell investigators these days, and also includes government agencies who fail completely to deliver on what they promise the public, such as we are living today with the Commission for the Protection of Refugees in Canada, is a group of people who are supposed to analyze the reasons for the person becoming a refugee in their own country, and then analyze in this country what protection they need, and included in that is support, whether that support is through a changing of the name or providing a new place to live or any legal assistance, but always includes financial support while this is going on. Now, we have, of course, been through the first half of this process and have noted that they have provided zero support, not financial, not informational, nothing except for their purposes. They want us to allow one of their lawyers to speak on our behalf. And that lawyer won't even return our calls. They want us to do a workshop in June, the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th of June, the 4 days before the beginning of summer, laying down everything we know. And yet they have basically allowed, if not directly activated, attempts to kill us during this process, not quickly, but slowly. They've not provided any funds for Jennifer. They have played with the mechanics of our vehicles that could cause us harm on the road. They have, as I've told you, I'm lying in bed because of having an intake of some chemistry that I'm told is used in corn crops as a pesticide, and that Jennifer has a weaker version of the same thing. So they've basically done things to the house, such as shifting the water pipes so that the outdoor water put in for feed to the animals was either hot instead of cold or polluted with this pesticide stuff. And half our animals have died since we attended the first meeting in Montreal. And I'm sure had it not been for Jennifer being here, I would have done like the goats and just curled up and waited to die, because there was no way for me to get around and prepare my own daily chores and do the daily chores and at the same time survive. I have, of course, a very high level of rejection of this, and many people may have died if they didn't have the kind of rejection facilities that are included in my DNA. So that's what the people who work in the cell do, is they come and they investigate who came up with these ideas, who's promoting these ideas to cause us pain, and what their penalty is when it comes to the end times, when they show up for trial, is determined by what they did without repairing what they did, determines whether their decomposition ends up as permanent or temporary, and if temporary, whether in the terms of billions of years, millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years before they would even look anything like a human being again, but certainly with no right to cross over to another dimension.
Yeah, you talked about that concept of the sump pump, how a lot of people will, be born.
The sump pump that we have, and has basically been a problem since we moved in here, is one that receives water and has to eject that water at a speed faster than most sump pumps can handle. We've had to replace the sump pumps. At one time we had 3 of them working. And the water comes at most unusual periods in time, not basically waiting for a spring melt or whatever, but it can be 25 below zero outside, and yet water is pouring into the sump pump. It is believed that this water is contaminated and contains the gas or pesticide that is being laid out on one side of the house on the way to the barn, so that there is an accumulation that takes place, and that accumulation is dependent upon the density of the content of this solution. And I've had attacks from what I now know is this cause on at least 3 and maybe 5 occasions. However, this one being the worst, which suggests that the purification for their purposes has gone on recently and has been much more effective, because when we came back from the first visit to Montreal, we delivered the content of Jennifer's documents at the time, and we met nobody but the person at the door. However, when we went back the second time, which was March the 4th, first time was February 15th, we were put through a legal process which explained to us what we needed to do in order to satisfy their needs, but explain absolutely nothing about what they were going to do to help us. And that's what I suggested to you before, was that they needed the information we hold in a more formal manner, and they want for workshops to do that deed in June. On our return from there, what basically began to occur was every goat that was pregnant gave birth, except for 2, to a stillborn kid. That was followed by the death of the eldest goat, who had had a living kid, who then died because it didn't have a mother to feed her. And as the days progressed, a total of 7 live goats died.
Wow.
And that includes the 2 babies that had been born to goats during that period in time and had lived. And the way they died, Gerd, is very important to grasp. They lost the capability to stand. Their front legs could not support them. So they fell kind of flat on their faces, and eventually the rear end followed, and you could see their rear end struggling to get up, but no movement at all in the front legs. And that's exactly what happens to me, is that it always begins with the hips and the knees and the ankles and the feet, but it then moves up and starts working on your thighs, your shoulders, your elbows, your hands, your neck. And the one part that remains from the time it appears is your wrists. Therefore, your inability to do anything physical with your hands. And of course, if you run a farm, working with your hands is probably the most important. If you had some kind of vehicle to take you around, you could get to most places without walking, but you still couldn't do what you need to do. You can't pull a bale of hay apart without using your hands. You can't fix things, without using your hands. So That's basically what they do to us. Then they attack the vehicles, make sure we have no transportation. They've impounded Jennifer's vehicle because she was told by the police she has no insurance. And how can you get insurance if you're not given any funds at all? Her insurance company in the U.S., of course, had automatic payments on her U.S. bank account. So when you can't deposit money into the account, you can't pay the insurance, and therefore they use that to claim that you have no right to use the vehicle and it must be impounded. So that kind of stuff, house stuff, body stuff, vehicle stuff, are all linked to the fact that we know what we know. They don't want other people to know what we know. Well, the fact that we have spoken on the telephone on a number of occasions recently means at least 2,000 people who listen in, friend or foe, also know. And therefore, there can never be a cover-up of this secret. The secret is basically all linked to memory. They want to know the beginnings of how we got to who we are from the time 80 million years ago when the original memory was a tree. And they want to know it before they launch their exploration of the universe, which has to wait out the period of Alder-Amin, which probably means going underground at about 4000 AD and not coming out for another 12,000 years, and then using all the information they gained in the pre-Ice Age and in the post-Ice Age period, they will then restart the takeover of the entire universe. They will have the data they need for travel in space, exiting, but they will never have the information on the departure, the means of departure from here, and the opening of another universe that can only be opened by Jennifer. So they're doing everything they can to force us to disclose that information. But although we have it, we don't know it until it's time. So they could do anything they want to us, and they cannot extract it, but they're trying. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just thinking about what you're saying. Well, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry I can't be more clear, but I'm lying in bed and I'm very tired.
Thanks for...
So, good luck.
Yeah.
Spread the word.